We
So
can
have
have
you
a reality where medical debt is held over people's heads, but luckily we've had people that defended Americans over that. But medical debt is still associated with 65% of bankruptcies in America.
fair? That's fair.
And
So
medical debt does not exist anywhere else. So
have you looked into Trump's plan though for the Medicaid system? Trump is actually trying to expand on that to allow the not the universal for all, but similar to what you're doing, like what you described with Australia, how they have the two-tier system. He wants to allow that more for working class families that cannot technically get on Medicare or
okay,
Medicaid,
so
I should
that's
say.
not true at all. What you're saying right now never happened.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you for the debate. Honestly, I've never actually met somebody from the left that actually is willing to have conversations like this. So I do appreciate you. I will definitely follow you on YouTube and stuff. Yeah, I was the one that called you.
Hello, yeah, I was on Do Not Disturb.
That's
So
okay. It's okay. So I'm new to your channel. I've watched a lot of other like leftist leaning, all that great jazz. Where do you exactly stand? Just so I know I'm not trying to like point any fingers or anything like that.
I'm not a leftist. I'd
Okay.
probably be in between, center left. I'm for some form of universal health care. It doesn't need to be
Okay.
single payer like Canadian Medicare for all,
Yeah, no,
but I
because
want some form of universal. So like
that would
Australia
destroy
and Germany, for
economically.
example. Well, Australia, are you familiar with like Australia and Germany and how they do it?
Yes, their healthcare systems are very flawed.
Okay,
They use a lot of our technology, but they don't actually help a lot of their citizens either.
so in the terms of health insurance, Australia has a two-tier system where you can either be
Mm-hmm.
on the government plan where everyone's covered, every single person
Where you
can be covered by the Medicare. And then if you want
or
to
you can
buy
have single
private health
payer.
insurance or you can have private health insurance through an employer, you can do that in Australia. In Canada,
So
you need to have the single payer plan, but in Australia there's a multi-payer plan.
yeah, which is similar to ours to a certain extent, but not necessarily
Well,
the
we
same.
only have Medicare for old people and then Medicaid for poor people. So we don't have anything to cover the
Well,
people in the middle that usually get screwed over the most.
you also have though emergency room visits that you don't technically have to pay back. They don't go to a debt collector.
But it still can be leveraged against someone. It depends on what policies the presidential administration pursues and what happens
So
federally and state wise. We can
so have
have a
you
reality where medical debt is held over people's heads, but luckily we've had people that defended Americans over that. But medical debt is still associated with 65% of bankruptcies in America.
fair? That's fair.
And
So
medical debt does not exist anywhere else. So
have you looked into Trump's plan though for the Medicaid system?
his plan for the Medicaid system.
Correct. So
What
how
is
he
his plan
plans
for the
to
Medicaid system?
so what the plan was from what I was reading, I do believe it was either HuffPost or Washington Post, um, through his vivid talks with them. The actual Obamacare system, he wants to rebuild and revamp that. He doesn't want to keep it the same way it is right now. So he's trying to get back to the policy similar to what you described it with Australia.
What does
But he's
rebuild and
also trying,
revamp mean?
so he's trying to rebuild it from the ground up. So basically, cutting it off. So no longer the Medicaid, Medicare for all type deal that Obama did during his terms.
Obama
But
didn't do Medicare or Medicaid. He did some Medicaid expansion, which was optional for states, and also Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, was a way to facilitate private markets. He didn't do any like universal health care or anything.
correct. That's what I mean. Trump is actually trying to expand on that to allow the not the universal for all, but similar to what you're doing, like what you described with Australia, how they have the two-tier system. He wants to allow that more for working class families that cannot technically get on Medicare or
Okay,
Medicaid,
so
I should
that's
say.
not true at all. What you're saying right now never happened.
Welcome to Draw Law Politics. I'm editing this video while traveling, but we are going to keep journeying into the mind of the median voter. Please drop a like, comment, and subscribe. This is painful to hear, but these are the conversations we need to have.
Trump wants to cut Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security. He tried to with every single budget he passed. So he wants to reduce Medicaid. He wants to have more working requirements for Medicaid and more strict requirements to be on Medicaid. So he wants to reduce Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security and privatize more of Medicare, more of the VA, and more of Social Security. So I don't know where you're
He
getting
wants
from
to
that Trump wants to
cut
do universal health
defund the
care.
VA. Where are you getting the logic that he's trying to boost the VA?
Because he tried passing cuts to all of these programs in every budget that he
Co-
passed as president.
correct. He tried to cut the exponential spending of those programs. So the billions of dollars that they're paying in administrative fees every year for the VA, they're not actually helping the soldiers that have fought. We're
For
paying more for the
Medicaid, the
deaths.
point you made, the main point you brought up about healthcare, where did you hear that from?
I believe it was either, like I said, I want to say either Washington Post or HuffPost, one of the two.
Is there any way you could send me a source that Trump wants to expand? Are you saying he wants to expand Medicaid and Medicare to cover everyone?
Correct. He's trying to expand it to get more working class families into it.
So you think
So the
Trump wants to
system,
do Medicare for all, or some
not
version of it, like Bernie Sanders wanted
not
to do?
not similar to what Bernie Sanders wanted to do. What he's trying to do is with the Medicaid acts that he's trying to do, similar to what Obamacare did, how I'm trying to think of the right wording here without making myself look too dumb. Um, how you explain with the Obamacare Act, how he did the Affordable Care Act. He's trying to expand the Medicaid for all to the working class citizens that don't classify for that. So, for example, I'm a father and a husband, and I have two small children. My two small children are covered under Medicaid because I make too much to cover myself and my wife. He's trying to expand that to where working class families that make under, I do believe it's either 2,300 or 2,500 a month, that considered technically working poverty, that are still qualified for the husbands or fathers or the sons, daughters, parents, are covered as well within that Medicaid. I am trying to find the
So
link for you as
the
well.
only information about Trump you can possibly find is Trump trying to reduce Medicaid spending and also to make it harder to get Medicaid, not easier. So I just don't know where you heard about this from.
Sure.
And also, just like in general, when Trump was in office, the Affordable Care Act provisions that supported things like Medicaid, Trump tried getting rid of the Affordable Care Act in general. He tried removing Obamacare. He tried killing Obamacare as hard as he could. He
So
tried
that
his
he can
hardest, but it
rebuild it,
wasn't
though.
successful. But no, what does rebuild it mean? He had no plan to replace it.
He was looking for a better option other than the Obamacare.
Okay,
So
okay, so when you
allowing,
say he's looking for a better option, do you know what his current healthcare plan is?
no, I'm not familiar.
Do you think he has a healthcare plan? Like in general, do you
Yes.
think he has one?
I think he does have a plan in general, yes. Do we know what that plan is yet because he's not technically in office yet? I think time will tell with that.
Do you think it's good to hire someone for a job who doesn't have any plans at all?
I think basically based off of the 4 years that we've seen in his term, I think he would do very well at.
When he tried removing
Considering
Obamacare without a plan to replace it.
I'm
So
sure
he's
he
never
had a
talked about a
plan
real
to
plan.
correct because he was stonewalled at every turn by the
No, he
Senate and
didn't
the
have a
Congress.
plan. He didn't have a plan. Like right now, why did he answer during the debate that he has concepts of a healthcare plan?
I'm sorry, you said that one a little bit too fast for me. I did not hear you.
Sorry,
I apologize.
at the debate versus Harris, why did Trump say he has concepts of a healthcare plan, and why did he not say any healthcare plan at all?
Because like any good poker player or debatist, you don't want to reveal your whole plan of action before you actually have the time to enact it.
Do you realize if you're going to take that as a standard, then you are allowing politicians to just say anything at all if you
Okay.
like them? As long as
Oh,
you like their vibes, they could just say anything and
allow
you're going to trust them?
allow me to rebut you on that then. We were taking Kamala Harris at her word because of fracking. I live in Pennsylvania. I live in a very high fracking state. She said she was going to ban fracking, but immediately switched up her tune as soon as the presidential election hit her doorstep on fracking. But we were willing to trust her.
Yes, considering Joe Biden's administration drilled more oil than any presidential administration in
No,
American history.
he did not.
That's
There's
objectively true.
no.
That's objectively true.
mm,
You said, okay,
That's
so the healthcare
false.
plan you talked
He
about
shut
does not
down.
exist. First
He
off,
shut 3 pipelines down within a matter of a
we still
month.
produced more oil. He didn't shut down pipelines. The things you're talking about are extensions to
The
pipelines. We
Keystone,
produced
the,
more oil than Saudi Arabia and Russia combined at one point, which are number 2 and 3. And in 2023, we were at peak American energy independence, higher than any time in the past 70 years off of oil production and
were,
also green energy at the same time.
but were we a net exporter?
It
Were
doesn't
we the
matter if we're a
highest
net
net?
exporter. It doesn't matter if we're a net exporter.
Here's
We're a rich country. We're going to consume. It's like trade deficits. Rich countries consume more than they give out because we don't do base level manufacturing as much. We consume a lot in America.
correct, but if you're also looking at it as an economic standpoint for the GDP, Would you not want it to be a higher GDP or a lower GDP?
We had all-time high GDPs and stock markets under Biden because we don't just have an economy based off oil. We're not Russia or Saudi Arabia. We don't have just because they call it a petrodollar doesn't mean we actually have our economy based off of gas and oil. Our other industries are flourishing right now, and Joe Biden supported manufacturing and infrastructure. And yes, he drilled more oil
But
than
yet,
Trump in his
but
presidency.
yet he cut most of the deregulations that Trump allowed to allow a higher economic boom within the country
So
for
the
4
fact that
years.
Joe Biden brought back regulations and still drilled more oil than Trump shows you that those regulations were not necessary to cut if they
The
were still able to drill
deregulation,
more oil than Trump.
I'm saying in general, as far as economic policy,
How did
we
Joe
have a
Biden's
higher,
administration have the highest stock market of all time then?
because their inflation rate allowed them to force and change the markets into a way that we don't have a capability of changing that other than to de-inflate. So if your inflation goes up by a 35% increase over a 4-year period, yes, of course you're going to have a higher value, but does that value actually equal the same amount dollar to dollar?
The stock market is based off of people
Which,
investing in that market. So it
correct.
goes up when people see positive future projections and speculation about the economy. So if we're having an inflation crisis, a true inflation crisis that was really crippling our economy, the stock market would not be going up. It would not be hitting
So,
all-time highs because it's not literally just like inflation makes the stock market price go up. It doesn't work like that. The increases that we saw under Biden were higher than under Trump. And again, like I said before, Obama's final 3 years of growth were higher than any 1 year of Donald Trump's economic growth. So both Obama's and Biden's economic plans produced much better outcomes than Trump's. And I can actually go through all those
but
policies. I don't even know what Trump's policies are because he didn't talk about them.
but the economic growth of the country itself, if you look at that based off of Trump's versus Joe Biden's, you're
Yes, we
you're
grew
still
more
saying that
under
we have a
Biden.
more economic policy, even though we've had a 40% on the working class as far as an inflation,
Yeah, so
where you
real
have a
wages. Are you
record
familiar
of
with real wages by chance?
the real wages.
Yeah.
Depending on what I'm not an economic guru or anything like that, so dumb it down for me, if you
So
would.
regular wages would just be, how much wages in America are going up. So how much people on
Correct.
average are making, or we'll do like medians, or we'll go by working class, middle class,
Sure.
upper class. And then we have our inflation. So that'll be with grocery prices, housing, childcare, all that kind of stuff. And then real wages are our wages in relation with those different inflationary sectors. So
Correct.
our wages, the wage increase, the wage inflation, but the wage increase we saw since 2021 actually kept pace or even outpaced grocery inflation since 2021. But we did have
But is
issues with
it
like housing and childcare, for example. We did have issues there. We have a housing issue right now with prices in America.
same
But when we talked about
same
grocery
with
prices, that was a non-issue. When we talk about the wage increases for the lower class, middle class, and also upper class, we had huge increases in real wages. In fact, the American dollar in 2024 could buy more groceries than it could in 2019, according to real wages.
but at the same time as the real wages also including the gas and oil industry as well within the inflation bracket.
So we would compare wages to all of those industries, but gas and oil has it's been crashing down as well. But those are mostly dictated by private markets and global events more so than what a president does. But I mean, either way, gas prices have
When
been at a good rate right now,
so
especially comparing to real wages.
so when you're comparing that though, and you're not including that gas or the oil industry within that wage group, you're also cutting out about 30 to 45%
Okay,
of
so the
that
reason I
budgeting.
said that initially, so we can go like issue by issue. I think Harris's housing plan was better. So like with housing costs, I think she had a real plan for that. Trump was just talking about mass deportations and selling away federal land, which doesn't make much sense. But like when I
We're not
isolate
selling
these
away the
issues,
federal land, keeping the federal land within the actual country to American citizens, not selling it overseas to Chinese growers,
well, my
such as
my
in
biggest
Oklahoma.
okay, so do you mean Chinese farmers? Did you say?
The marijuana farmers in Oklahoma, yes,
Okay,
that are
so
mainly Chinese that were debunked to show that they were buying the land up illegally through the Joe Biden presidency.
as far as our farmland purchases go, Canada buys like 1/3 or almost half of foreign investment into American farmland. China owns like 1%. So I don't want to get away from the economic thing. So like
Sure,
when I
sure.
talk about real wages. I bring that up because the number one narrative this election was that grocery prices are way too high. And according to
Correct.
all metrics, under Joe Biden's presidency, the working class and middle class, their wages grew more under Joe Biden's presidency than they have since Franklin Delano Roosevelt, since
So
FDR.
when you're breaking down those numbers, I'm not trying to do it anecdotally
No, no, it's fine. Yeah.
from a perspective. I'm losing more money in the past 4 years within my Roth IRAs, within my 401ks, and within my own personal budgeting under Joe Biden than what I did with Trump. My employer, the same exact statistics. She's paying us more, but she's not netting the same profit.
I
I
would need
work
to
for a
know what
family of,
sector you're in. I would need to know like what your
I
personal
work,
finances look like. I would need to know how your 401k is going down,
sure,
even with
sure.
all-time high
I
markets. So,
Well, so my 401k profiting share, what I have into it, I put 4% of my total wages in it. I work for a small rent-to-own company here in Pennsylvania. It's family-owned and operated. There's literally 7 employees, including myself. She's family-owned and operated. We worked throughout COVID during not lockdowns. We didn't have lockdowns a lot in PA. But while other businesses were closed due to the emergency lockdowns, I'm sorry, I'm trying not to yawn at the same time while I'm talking. Um,
you're good
we
as late.
lost. eh, Oh, it's only 11 o'clock for me, so I'll be up for another couple hours. um, but the economic downfall of our company, we watched our profits go from, I want to say from 20, what year was the full pandemic over? I want to say 2022, 2021 era of Joe Biden for profit sharing for our 401ks. I was making under Trump, I was investing probably 5% with the Joe Biden economic policies that were impacted between gas, between food, between healthcare. I was losing more money under his administration versus Trump. Trump, I was actually able to save and put more money into my accounts.
Okay, so what I would say just off the bat, you said you work in a rent-to-own company. What kind of products do you sell in that?
Everything for
Like
households.
washers,
So
dryers,
up
televisions, furniture?
any appliances, bedroom sets, you name it, electronics, game systems, TVs, computers, desktops, gaming computers.
Okay.
If
So in
if
the
it's a
past four
household
years,
amenity,
just to go through a couple economic points. So we saw DoorDash, for example. DoorDash and Uber Eats had all-time high revenues and profits in the past 4 years, peaking in 2023 and 2024 when the inflation was the worst. We had
correct,
all-time high gambling spending by far, especially in
correct,
Pennsylvania. We had all-time high spending for concert tickets and sporting events, and also buying sports on TV. We also do
correct.
have a lot of people taking out personal loans and credit cards, which correlates a lot with gambling and a lot of those industries rising. But we also, on another level, we have more innovative ways to do rent to own. So now many more companies offer rent to own now through themselves, through Affirm, through
But they're not.
Comenity, and a couple other banks. I'm just saying, like, when you talk about your specific economic condition, if you're making less money, it may also just be because your local economy is different. Maybe it's how many people in that area are looking to go to a rent to own store. Because I don't know personally
See,
anyone who goes to a rent to
we
own store. I know people who go to Best Buy and they'll use Affirm to finance
so
something.
here's the difference between our company and what you're describing through rent to own. You're describing leasing. So you're
No,
doing
no, Affirm,
a
you buy, you
lease.
own it at the end. You own it. You own that.
Correct.
But
No,
there's
no,
new
no.
ways to do. Yeah.
What I mean by a leasing of it. So, for example, a quick comparison, apples to apples, from my rent-to-own company. Like I said, I don't want to put their name out in public because I don't know how my boss would feel about it. But my company, compared to, let's say, you go to Ashley Furniture, which we sell, we're a distributor of Ashley Furniture products. Okay. So I'm looking at a couch. That couch cost at my store as a cash price $1,200. You do a rent to own lease, you pay 50/50 into a leasing agreement, which is of the rent to own contract over a 78 week contract. When you go to Ashley Furniture, you're paying $1,800 on a 5 year leased term.
Yeah, I
So you
understand
not
how the
only
business
have,
how the business models work. I'm just kind of questioning. I'm asking more information about this because the economy is changing rapidly. So like, if is it a place where you
I will
come
grant
there in person and you could leave that day with an item that you pick up from the store? Is that like the main customer base?
110%, but we also do marketing throughout the actual state itself. We
Can you
actually,
purchase online?
yes,
Okay.
You can do the
So
applications
through
via
economic
online as well.
changes, if we have big corporations expanding their ability to do the service you provide to people, which is like giving very, small loans to people to take these items and purchase them at the end of the contract, or lease, not lease, but you know what I mean, at the end of the
Yeah, yeah.
contract. Um, my question would be, do you have policies from Biden or Trump that affected this directly, or are you just saying in general? Because I'm trying to see like how you're tying this back to
So
politics.
the Inflation Reduction Act, whenever it
Sure.
fully got put into office, it increased marketing goods within not only in my sector but other sectors as well. So that inflation alone caused our prices to go up, which caused our consumers' prices to go
It
up as
increased
well.
what?
Our costs.
No.
So
What
cost
policy? What part of the Infrastructure Reduction Act affected this?
the inflation of it. So when you're looking at the actual inflation that was, I believe, I don't know off the top
But
of
our,
my
our
head, I
inflation
remember.
rate went down after the Inflation Reduction Act was passed. The main inflation in America was seen from the results of COVID. So, like, the Inflation Reduction Act in 2022 did not come into effect really until now, which is when inflation is crashing down. So, all the inflation you're talking about was from the after effects of COVID, and inflation was already spiking under Donald Trump. And I only say that too because maybe things aren't perfect in America, but we still led the world in our post COVID recovery.
Like,
And
I'll
these
give you
are
that one.
conditions that were going to exist under Trump as well. So, like, if Trump remained president, I almost wish he won in 2020 because he was able to pass off all the responsibility to Biden and Harris. But that policy
But
worked out very well. That was not the cause. The Inflation Reduction Act did help reduce inflation. It helped support demand level stimulus. It helped the velocity of money in our economy. We actually spent more money in America than other countries did, but our inflation went down faster
correct.
because we
So
were able to do it in very strategic ways. So, like, when you're talking about this, that's not Joe Biden or Kamala's fault. You could even blame Trump for handling COVID worse. For the inflation crisis in America, and I wouldn't blame anyone because the supply chains, global inflation, every country around the world faced inflation. But Biden got
great.
zero credit for having the number one comeback after the COVID pandemic.
Mm, I grant a 50-50 on that one, just because I kind of look at it through a narrower lens than just the comeback itself through a global. Yes, I will give you grant on that. Nationally, though, the comeback, if you think about it and base it off of the actual statistics, I'm trying to remember the actual stats from the show that I was watching.
But just think for a second though, what you just said. You're saying that globally we led. We were number one in the world. We were the most
the
coveted economy globally.
were
But
the
nationally, we did not meet what American standards were. So Americans have very high standards. I would even say that many
correct.
Americans are in a pampered position because we're in a very good
How
country, a very rich country. We don't understand how bad things are in countries that are authoritarian, that don't have the
I
same
agree.
regulations we do. People's houses fall apart, their TVs explode when they buy them from the stores. We have a really good country. Even if
There
you
you
go
go.
bankrupt or something, we have so many things to support people. It's great. So if we're talking like we led globally, there was something that happened to affect the entire globe, which is why the entire globe had economic issues. And the fact we led globally, that's the only conversation I think we can have because
That's
I
fair.
don't know. We're already the GOAT. We're already number one since COVID. So, like, when you're saying like nationally, if it sounds like, and I'm not going to change your mind in one conversation, but it sounds like a lot of this is the result of the media hyping up what's happening economically, and hyping up
I
these
don't.
storylines to make us have higher expectations when in
Sure.
reality America performed really well.
As America should, because we are the shining light on the hill for most of those countries.
Yeah,
Why
but
we
we
have such a
performed the worst
mass.
in COVID. So we had the worst COVID outcomes. We had 5% of the world's
How,
population and 20% of COVID deaths. 5% world population, 20% COVID deaths under Trump.
but were those deaths actually calculated for COVID correctly, and were they not actually, let's say, padded?
They were calculated the same way deaths were around the world, and we still had
But
20% of them.
at the same time, was our medical institution, and well, no, I don't want to say big pharma, but technically, let's say big pharma, for example, using antidotes quickly, um, were they counting cases of COVID deaths properly? For example, guy dies on a motorcycle crash, they test him for COVID, they count it as a COVID death. A lot of those statistics for the COVID deaths were 20% higher than what they should have been.
So I would agree the numbers at that time were, but with our
I
data
I
now,
agree,
when we go back and look at it, then we can see that we had a far higher number of COVID deaths. And a large part of that is because Americans did not take the vaccine at a high rate. Um,
which is good, but
that's
in
not
my
a good
opinion,
thing at all.
sorry,
That's not. It's just not
I
good. Well, with your opinion and what you were told, but according to fact about all this
I'm
kind of stuff.
I'm
I mean,
looking
you
at
think
it
Trump
from a
wants to do
micro.
universal health care, so I don't know like where you get your media from, because Trump is
No,
the
no, no.
like opposite of that.
I'm not saying universal health care. I'm saying like a similar to what you had described as a two-tier system through Australia.
But yeah, you wanted to cut
He
Obamacare, you wanted to cut Medicaid, he
because
wants
he
to lower Medicare. Like he doesn't want to
because
rebuild
he
it though. He
saw
wants to cut it with zero
he
plan to rebuild it. And you just say, when I bring that up to you, he has zero plan, he wants to remove it. You just say, oh, it's because he's a master poker player. Do you see how these are all like
no no no
narratives
no
in
no
your
no
brain?
no. I'm not saying because he's a master poker player. I'm saying because of the fact that they need rebuilt from the ground up. It's not something that you can just
But
fix or
he has
improve.
shown zero evidence that he understands this issue at all. He has shown zero
I'll
evidence at all.
I'll grant that one. I will honestly grant you on that one. What I'm saying on the main aspect of it is when you're looking at it as a breakdown level of dollars to donuts, under Joe Biden, within the last 4 years, economically standing, we're paying over $4,000 per person per household more than what we did under Trump. Under Trump, we were making an estimated of $5,000 extra within the yearly timing prior to COVID. I'll grant COVID shut and fucked up a lot of things within 2019 2020. It did. But if you're actually comparing the actual numbers between the first 3 years of Trump versus the first 4 years of Joe Biden, the numbers do not add and do not make sense when you're looking at the actual statistics based on those numbers.
I mean, with the same economic conditions, our economic growth, like I said, in Obama's final 3 years was higher than any 1 year under Trump. And also, our economic growth actually slowed after Trump passed this tax policy. So I just don't know if we're going to compare it off that. Trump performed worse economically than Obama. And then also, Biden dealt with COVID, and we still had all time high in oil and also like investments. We
But we
tripled
weren't
or quadrupled our manufacturing investments in America and also our infrastructure. Like Trump, I'm sure you've seen this. Trump said multiple times, infrastructure week. Infrastructure is easy to pass. We're going to get infrastructure done to build back American roads. And he never got that done, but Biden did. Biden got a bipartisan plan done to build back roads. The only bill Trump actually passed of consequence was his Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which I would be fine with if he
correct,
didn't
which
give a big giveaway to corporations and billionaires. If he would have just done a middle class tax cut, that'd be great. But they never suggest to do that. So like
but
Biden's
those
and Harris's policy, where they're not gonna they said we're not
but
going to
those
increase taxes for
billionaire
anyone who makes under $400,000. I think that was a really good approach at that.
so but here's my one argument to that though. When you look at the breakdown of the tax cuts to the billionaires, that did lead down to the middle class from the billionaires and millionaire class without those deregulations.
There's just no
So when
evidence
you're
that trickle down
giving
economics works though. Like there's no evidence that money actually trickled down to people. Like there was no wage growth as a result of Trump's policies. In fact, the trillions of dollars that Trump put us into debt. And I'm someone who thinks debt spending can be good, it can be bad because sometimes you need to take out a loan for a business to make that business
correct,
work. So like sometimes you need to invest in something as a country and go into debt. So I think infrastructure is a really good investment, and the New Deal showed us
I
that,
agree.
and also bipartisan infrastructure bills show us that. That's one reason
So
private companies can be so successful is because our roads and bridges are so good now. After the New Deal, that's one thing that actually led us to like the Reaganomics, showing economic growth is because we had this infrastructure in place and the free market
yeah,
economics. But also, when we look at what these politicians actually do, I think it's really important to tie these things to policies and data that we can really map certain things onto, because the trickle down
sure,
economics is this conceptual thing where it's like, well, if we cut taxes for the rich, they're going to grow tons and they're going to give higher wages. But in reality, and this is a free market principle, and this
correct.
is why I'm saying I'm more free market, I'm more pro free market than Trump is sometimes, most of the time,
A
because
lot
like
of people
tariffs are
are
anti
actually.
free market. But so like when we talk about the tax cuts for the billionaires, with all the extra money corporations had, virtually like all of it, 95 to 99% of that went into stock buybacks and increasing shareholder value. So it didn't even go into investing in that business and opening, more facilities and more jobs. It went into the pockets of the ultra wealthy. And those tax cuts were supposed to spur growth, and we just never saw that come to fruition. And meanwhile, we're going into, $2-3 trillion. I think we went our total national debt right now. I'm pretty sure we got like 25% of that under Donald Trump, and that's, I mean, you could take COVID out of
Well,
that, and it's still extremely high.
I was gonna say I think 1.7 or like 1.9 of that was from COVID though,
Yeah, but
from the simulation.
how much of Trump's national debt? How much did Trump add
I
to
want to say it's
debts?
1.8 or 1.9, if my head's not as foggy as it should be.
So my issue with that as well, like I said, I'm okay with going into infrastructure debt. I'm okay with
Yeah.
going into debt for that kind of investment. So okay,
What
so
I'm looking at,
from
yeah,
January 2017 to January 2021, our national debt increased by $8 trillion before
correct. But
COVID.
how much of that was during 2020 to 2021?
This is oh wait, let me cut out COVID again.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like if you cut out COVID from that, I believe I want to say, like I said, I agree with you on the stats of the eight trillion over the 4 year period from 2017 to 2020, or I'm sorry, 2017 to 2021. But if you break down the numbers from 2021 to 2020, what percent of that 8 trillion was solely COVID? That's the numbers that I mainly want to, for my own satisfaction here.
Well, the number you're quoting is from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act estimates, but then we had
Okay,
huge increases in military, defense, and non-defense
correct.
discretionary spending.
Which
I'm
is
trying
a
to find the exact numbers, but Trump went up by similar rates to both Biden and also
Harris.
Obama. But like I said, if we're gonna go into like debt, I don't want to do it for tax cuts for billionaires so they can do like stock buybacks. I'd rather do that
Yeah,
for infrastructure. So that's my least favorite policy part about the Trump administration is because you talked about infrastructure so long and you never got it done, and we just gave tax cuts to billionaires instead, and that kind of that stuff annoys me. And if we
yeah,
really wanted to do a tax cut just for the middle class and lower class, we can do that. Like we can do that,
yeah.
but there's a reason they
Get rid
don't.
of the fight.
And
Get rid of the
also,
fight.
I'm gonna bring on other people as well, but I want to end on a point. So whatever you want to wrap up on, feel free.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you for the debate. Honestly, I've never actually met somebody from the left that actually is willing to have conversations like this. So I do appreciate you. I will definitely follow you on YouTube and stuff, and watch you guys, and hopefully I can debate you again.
Okay, I appreciate that. And even in this conversation, and by the way, in the chat, I see people trying to call in. I got like 15 missed calls. Like I have in
Okay.
my thing, if someone, and saying this to whoever's watching right now, if I'm gonna pick people at random to talk to, but if you want to jump ahead of the line, then you can donate $10 through Venmo and give me
Sure.
your Discord name or phone number. So like, our first caller here, definitely want to thank him for coming on. But yeah, if someone wants to come on really, really bad to the point you're gonna call 15 times, then just donate $10 to my Venmo and I'll bring you on. If you really want to
Fair
be
enough.
first in line, because I have like 15 to 20 people waiting. But yeah, and even in this conversation, so like the Trump healthcare stuff, and I'll just say like I
I'm
do a
gonna
lot
do
of
some more
policy work.
research on that and get
Yeah, like
back to you
that's
on that
something
one.
when I hear that, I'm like, this is something that like genuinely, and I want to have these conversations without sounding like combative or trying to, talk to
I
someone like they don't know things. Because I do this
I
for like, I do this all the time. So when I
I
hear that,
feel
I'm
that
like,
you've
Trump
been
has not done any of that. Like Trump has literally done the opposite of what you said. So I want to know where you got this information from because
sure.
that's a media source that I want to look at. Because if they're actively lying about Trump's policies to people, I think that's something we need to keep track of. Because I think we can all agree on, we should have plans from our politicians. We should demand
110%.
plans from our politicians. They should respect voters. We should demand a less corrupt system. And I think people voted for Trump under false pretense that he was going to take care of those issues, and it's definitely a conversation we need to keep having
Just
once
real quick,
his administration takes over.
before I let you go, do me one favor. I will gladly look at the sources and send them to you via YouTube, on chat or stream, whatever you want me to do. Do me a favor and look at Steven Crowder. I know he did a very good expose on the economics breakdown. How I was saying about like the $5,000 more money in our pockets versus for Trump versus when Biden we were losing money. He does do a very good breakdown of the statistics on that. You can get that on YouTube or Rumble, whatever one you want to use there. But he does cite the sources and everything else like that. So that's one of the ones I do remember from there, as far as the economic policies.
Okay, I'll try to find that video at some point. Maybe I'll do a
Sure,
reaction to it if I can find it. If you find it, you could feel free
sure,
to
yeah,
text it to this number. This is a random number I got for work purposes, work being
that's
YouTube.
fair.
Because obviously I don't want to use my real phone number for this. So feel free to
110%
text
agree.
anything to this number. And also, if anyone wants to call, even if it's during the day, if someone wants to leave a voicemail, nothing crazy, or I'll obviously block you. But if anyone wants to
Of
leave a
course, yeah.
voicemail, definitely feel free to do that with this number since it's not my actual phone number.
Hey,
Yeah,
man.
thank you for hopping on.
Yeah, my name's Ashton, and I hope you have a great night, and God bless.
All right, have a good night. Happy New Year.
Starting January 1st, I will be taking calls from anyone starting at 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. Eastern Time live on my channel. Make sure you subscribe. I want to see you there. And if you want to support this work, $2.99, $3 a month to support this channel through the channel memberships. Down below, you can leave a tip on the video, a tip through Patreon, Coffee, or any other app, Venmo, Droll Politics. Please consider supporting my channel. I will keep doing this, but yeah, I'm excited to keep seeing you around. Thank you.